I know your time is precious, so today we've got some really good content to go through with our email providers, Lyris, and yeah, one of the reasons why we had this webinar was the main question we do get asked is how to improve open rates and click-through rates of email campaigns. So effectively your ongoing newsletters and offers that you send to your own list. So today we've invited Bob Kamal from Lyris to join us and present on this very topic, which is list engagement. There's a whole bunch of factors that come down to list engagement, and Bob's going to go through those sort of item by item. But you and Direct have actually personally used the Lyris platform for just over 5 years now, and given that email, is our main tool in our belt, we solely rely on this platform for our business. And I can personally vouch that these guys are at the forefront of the industry. Their email knowledge allows them to customize their own platform to get the very best inbox delivery and also reporting on the campaigns that you do send out. So I'll let Bob chat about the actual platform a little more towards the end, but right now let's chat about list engagement. If you have any questions, on the left-hand side, and I will ask Bob some of those questions towards the end of the webinar if it hasn't been covered off. And we can also go into the platform a little bit more if you are interested in that. So Bob, are you there?
I am. Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
I'll leave you to it, Bob. If you can run through everything in terms of list engagement, and then we'll touch base towards the end when I have some questions for you. So thanks for joining us, Bob.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Lee. Great. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you guys about list engagement. So how to build and engage and really drive revenue from your database. So before I start, I always like to sort of go on this slide. It's something that everyone listening and everyone in the digital space or in retail, any sort of industry should know at the moment. It's that we're really moving heavily, or we actually have moved from the bricks and mortars world into a really sort of heavy digital world. It's not just about e-commerce anymore. It's about multiple platforms, multiple devices. So you're now talking to your customers, your prospects across so many channels, more channels in the history of marketing. And so this really presents, a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges for everyone listening today. And to really break that down, the opportunity and the challenge is you've got so many multiple channels and so many different types of areas that you're talking to your customers, whether that's your transactional information, what they're purchasing for online, or on mobile, their web behaviors, how they interact when they make it to your site, what social behavior, their preferences. So, there's a wild array of information coming your way, and managing that and making sure that you grow your list and you talk to your data in the right way, utilizing all these channels and taking all these channels into consideration is really, really important. Because essentially what you want to do is you want to build what is essentially the unified view of your customer. And so here at Lyris, we talk about it as being the channel of one. That is really building your communications around your customer, not necessarily yours. And I'll talk in a bit more details about moving away from the campaign-driven model to a more customer-centric model where you're building, automating, and sending things to your customers as they behave. And so how do you do that? Well, it's really lifecycle marketing. So list engagement is all about the right message with the right offer at the right time, and also reflecting the right level of engagement. And this is a really important addition that email platforms are able to give you, because at any given time how engaged your customers are with your brand. So before I go into each of the techniques, I like to start with this slide, which basically breaks out the customer journey through each of the phases with you. So whether that's acquisition, conversion, development, loyalty, all the way through to win back. So typically, when we start working with our clients, we see that they use email in a certain way. They're clearly capturing data, which is great. That can be on the web, in store, through a wide array of ways of doing that. They're sending out transactional emails. So thank you for purchasing X. Here's your receipt. And then they're also sending out a lot of generics. This is a typical kind of email program that we start working with clients with. And we call this the campaign approach. It's basically ad hoc. When you have a tactical sale, a campaign you need to get out to the client, that's when you communicate to them. What we really recommend is the customer life cycle. That is working with your marketing teams to really identify what are all the touch points that your customers or your prospects are coming in, and working out really solid data acquisition strategies. Something that's really, really key with email, and I'll go into a lot of detail, is welcome programs. So making sure that once you collect that data from whichever source, you're actually welcoming in those people in a way that drives revenue right at the beginning, drives list engagement right at the beginning. Then we recommend building things like a preference center. Preference center is a really, really great way to build that engagement from the beginning, because you're asking your customers or your prospects what they want you to email them about. Then we move towards things like progressive profiling, and I'll spend a lot of time talking about what that is. And basically, progressive profiling is using all the different elements that I talked about a couple slides ago. Your customer data, your e-commerce, every bit of information that your customer interacts with you on, profiling that back into your email database and building out a rich, deep database to really understand your customers. Then nurturing them through. So running a nurture program to basically email them depending on the behavior that they exhibit during that sort of nursery period. Then once you move over to the development phase, it's really, rather than sending out your generic type of newsletters, sending out segmented programs. So building dynamic content blocks. So you might send the one newsletter out once a month, but your content's actually variable and completely personalized down to as much detail as possible to your users. Then there are two programs, we call these the most powerful, because they're the ones that drive a lot of revenue. Browse and cart abandon, behavioral remarketing type programs, where, for instance, a cart abandon is where a customer goes onto your e-commerce site, should you have one, adds 1 or 2, 3, however many items into their cart, and then closes that cart for whatever reason. The cart abandon program allows you to then send an email period of time to actually try and drive them back into the cart. The browse abandon goes a step before that and basically allows you to email people based on what they viewed. So let's say I'm in a fashion retailer and I look at 2 or 3 different types of sweaters. A browse abandon program can email me with recommendations of the types of sweaters I've just looked at. Then finally, once you move into the loyalty phase, it's running things like post-purchase programs. So all the wonderful cross-sell and upsell opportunities you have there. The loyalty and retention programs, so really driving loyalty using email to building and build revenue. Referral programs. So once you've got customers at that loyalty phase, referral programs are just an absolutely incredible way of driving list growth and driving even more revenue. And social integration, where once upon a time social media was viewed as a conflicting or competing channel with email, we actually really recommend that you leverage both. So drive social fan bases from your email database, and then drive email database growth from your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts, etc. Then in the win back phase, we often see that no matter how great and how sophisticated an email program is, there's always a percentage of customers that either stop opening and clicking emails or stop purchasing from your brand. And that's where win-back programs come into their own. They're really great ways of reactivating and re-engaging lapsed customers or subscribers that have stopped engaging. So what I'll do now is basically take you through each of those different areas in a bit more detail. Where I'd like to start with is at the action phase. So as I mentioned, data acquisition. If you look at this in its entirety and map out all the different touch points that your customers are engaging with you and your business or your brand, there are multiple channels. So you could use things like in-store, online, the e-commerce checkout, call center, your social media, all those data points. If you're actually including a sophisticated data acquisition model there, you can start capturing all that detail and really start to drive the engagement from that point by identifying the most important data points that you will need. So for instance, at a very basic levels, capturing gender right at the very beginning, capturing birthday, capturing product preferences, then allows you to drive more relevant, more targeted programs. Preference centers are a great way to, once you've captured that data, then to ask your customers to tell you what they're interested in. This really empowers them, allows them to tell you what they want to hear from you and also when they want to hear from you. So it's great to ask them about the product categories that they're interested in, but also go one step further. Ask them if they're happy to hear from you once a day, once a week, once a month, once a year. And once you collect that information, make sure that it's actionable and usable. You know, we've seen a lot of companies, they collect really rich information, but then they don't do anything with it. That's actually quite counterproductive. So make sure that you employ a preference center that ties back into your email service provider, and you're actually able to send out relevant content. And we'll talk through a bit more about that a little bit later in the webinar. So once you've captured the data, once you've captured the relevant preferences, the really important step is the welcome program. Now, a welcome program could be one email, it could be a series of emails, but this is one of the most key elements in any lifecycle marketing program. Basically, it is the moment when someone subscribes is when they're telling you that they want to hear from you. That's the point in which your subscribers will be the most engaged. That's when they want to hear from you. That's when they're likely to convert. So take the opportunity. Welcome them immediately. If you've collected relevant data at the data acquisition or preference center phase, make sure you include that content in the welcome program. i.e., if they've told you they're a male, send them an email with content relating to them being a male. You know, if you've captured geographic information, if you've got geographic specials on, for instance, include that email in include that content in the welcome email. Make sure that right at this stage you outline the benefits of your email program. So what they'll expect, set the expectations, let them know that they'll receive one email a week, one email a day, and give them the option to go back to your preference center and update it if they'd like to. Really crucially, encourage them to whitelist your email address. Deliverability, which is, you know, a whole topic on its own, is becoming more and more important. But encouraging your subscribers to whitelist you will ensure that you'll make it to their inbox after the welcome email. And really crucially, it's an opportunity to drive revenue straight from the get-go. So once you talk to them and introduce your brand, introduce your program, it's a really good opportunity to encourage them to go onto your website, make their first purchase or make their second purchase. And what we really recommend is actually a series of emails. So not just send the one, but send 1, 2, and 3 within a 1 week or 2 week period and build that engagement straight away. So conversion. So what to do at the conversion phase. Okay, so once you convert your customer, so once someone's made a purchase with you, a post-purchase email is a really great way to actually engage with them and cross-sell and upsell them. Some really good examples that I've seen are not necessarily emails that encourage a purchase or you know, a post-purchase immediately, but they're ones that educate and teach the customer about what they've just purchased. You know, if you can incentivize, add relevant content, people will go back onto your website or go back into your store if you offer them some sort of a coupon or some sort of voucher, and it just continues the dialogue. Progressive profiling. So as I was saying earlier on, as and when customers engage with you, it's a really good opportunity to feed that depth back into your email database. Without getting too technical, an ESP has the opportunity to add the amount of columns of data that you collect on the customer. As a really basic example, if you don't collect the gender at the very beginning of your relationship or at the purchase, what you can do is look at your customers' behavior. If they're clicking onto the men's section of your website, for example, a lot more than they're clicking onto the women's section, then you can automatically update the gender tag yourself, because that's knowledge that you've built up over a period of time with the customer. And then you can start to target your emails a lot more relevantly. To expand that theory out, if you've got multiple product categories on your website, for instance, if you're a large retailer with computers and electrical, if you notice that your customers are looking at laptops quite frequently, or a customer is looking at laptops quite frequently, it's easy to build in rules to update their preference to computers, so to laptops. And that way you're able to mail them more relevant content without them having to actually tick a box or let you know what it is that they're interested in. Nurture programs are a really great way to start tailoring messages based on that behavior that you're learning. So as I said, if I'm looking at laptops within the computer section, a nurture program can then take that content, can then take my browse and actually send me information based on my behavior. A nurture program can be done any number of ways, but it's really, really crucial that at that very sort of early period, so right after the welcome program, you start nurturing them. So look at their behavior, understand their behavior, and send relevant content to them. Development. So once you start to develop your customers, so once they've been on your list for quite some time, how do you actually engage with them and continue that growth? One of the things we really recommend is things like segmented programs. There was a time early on in email marketing where the email newsletter, the monthly newsletter, was the king, and every company send out a newsletter with generic content about their brand to their subscribers. Then over the last few years, we started recommending against that, moving people towards targeted relevant content or relevant campaigns based on what people are interested in. So moving away from those generic newsletters sending out to everyone and actually only sending small segmented campaigns to smaller chunks of the database. What we recommend now is that perhaps you can send a newsletter out. You can send a once a month campaign out to your entire database, but personalize that content. So don't just send out a newsletter with the same content to everyone, but you're able to send out one newsletter with perhaps a static offer at the top and then relevant content blocks based on what people are either browsing, what they've told you within their preference center, or based on what they've purchased. So you're able to do that any number of ways, but by ensuring that each individual receives a tailored newsletter with content that is relevant and targeted to them, then they're going to be engaged. They're not going to be, they're not going to want to unsubscribe because they've just received, an email about something that they've never indicated any interest in or purchased in. It's going to be relevant to them. So your list engagement, your list health grows by doing that. Then there's things like the Browse Abandon program, which I touched on previously. Our Browse Abandon program works in a relatively simple way. Your web analytics can track what people are doing on your website once they move away from the email. So using things like Adobe Omniture or Google Analytics, you can actually say people are browsing and pass that information back into your email platform to say, Bob here has been looking at jewelry on the website, for example. Then firing off a Browse Abandon email, i.e. firing off an email once I've closed out of your website without actually having made a purchase or without putting anything into my shopping cart, you can send an email to remind me that I've been on your website, and you can offer gentle nudges. The example I've got here is free next day delivery. We have clients that use things like buying guides, just really gentle ways of getting people back onto your website and actually purchasing. To take that a step further, what I like to call the king of email programs is the cart abandon program. Basically, what you're able to do with this is take your e-commerce platform, so your Magentos, your Hybris, whatever e-commerce platform that you're using, and when someone abandons the cart, i.e. they put product into their cart, close the browser without making the purchase, that information passed immediately back to your service provider. Not just the customer information, but the actual cart information as well. So product 1 at price X, etc. By doing this, you're able to actually not just send them an email to remind them. You could actually send them an email with the cart and get them to click straight back into that cart with 1 or 2 clicks, finish the purchase. You could incentivize it, but we recommend against that, basically because you may end up training the customers to abandon cart to receive an incentivization. But what we recommend, I mean, I've used a very a simple example here of you left something behind. It's quite generic, it's quite soft, or you could actually put the products in and drive people back. We found some amazing results with cart abandonment programs. Some of our clients have had 40% of what would have otherwise been abandoned convert into revenue. That's that's thousands and thousands of dollars a month that would have just been lost to a competitor or not come back to their website. And the loyalty phase. Referral programs are a really, really great way to build your database. Basically, use your customers to drive that brand advocacy. Your customers are your most loyal advocates. So having them refer you to their friends is a much softer sell than you going out and spending a lot of your budget on data acquisition. So think about referral programs and build them that across channel. So use SMS if you've got it. Use your social if you've got it. Foster those long-term relationships. Reward your loyal customers by incentivizing them to refer their friends. And then finally, social media. As I mentioned before, social media should never be taken in isolation of email. Ensure that you use them as complementary channels. Where you have a large Facebook following, build competitions in, drive them to landing pages to register for email. Just make sure that what you do on one channel, you're doing on the other channel, and leverage each other to grow the two. And then finally, the win-back phase. So this is really where you've either lost the customer in terms of they've stopped spending with you over the last 6 months to 12 months, or they've stopped engaging with your email programs. I'm sure you've all seen some really great examples of these, but they're the classic "We've missed you" programs. These work really, really well because what we recommend you do with this is if you have, for example, subscribers in your email list that have stopped opening and clicking your emails over let's say the last 3 to 6 months, just sending the same content that you have been sending over the last 3 to 6 months isn't going to encourage them to open, click, and convert. What you need to do is take them out of your regular communication stream and put them into what we call an IE, send them off on their own journey, and encourage them to reactivate. So i.e., we've missed you. You can be a bit clever here. What have we done wrong, etc. Incentivize it. Just make sure that people, you use good subject lines and drive people back into clicking with your programs. In terms of customers that have stopped spending, this is something that you would know through your transactional database, your e-commerce system, your point of sale, or any other system that you're using. So if you do see that someone has stopped engaging with your brand or stopped purchasing from you over the last 3 to 6 months, it's the same concept. Just sending the same kind of communications won't necessarily work. However, if you isolate them and send them information, incentivize that information, then you're much more likely to actually convert. And then what we recommend is if you have a 3-touch reactivation or re-engagement program, and your subscriber doesn't engage with you after that, i.e. giving them 15%, 20%, 30% off doesn't work, we actually recommend you take them out of your main database and put them into an engaged segment. And what you do with that unengaged segment, we would recommend that once or twice a year you run a reactivation program and just try and get them back on. Otherwise, leave them out of your regular weekly, monthly, or tactical campaigns, because all you're doing there is damaging your sender reputation by sending to people that aren't open or clicking, and essentially misspending your CPM. So in terms of key points before we move on to questions, is really how we work and we recommend is you map your customer experience. You take the time to sit and look at your customer touch points. Look at where your customers are engaging with you all the way from the data acquisition phase through to the re-engagement, and then map your program to that and maximize your engagement. Automate a lot of this. So what we recommend is to build these programs out and automate them so that as and when it engages or behaves with your brand, these emails are going out. Reduces the overhead and the man hours required to manage them in your marketing team and maximizes your revenue. And finally, and probably most importantly, test and optimize. When you're first setting these programs, run testing on subject lines, run testing on time of day, day of week. Understand what the most optimal behavior that your subscribers will have, and then optimize it. And then don't just set and forget it from there. Continuously re-optimize. If you're getting 60% open rates, try and aim for 70%. If you're getting 70%, aim for 80%. There's always room for improvement in email marketing, and it's a very lucky channel where results are quite instant, which means testing is a lot easier than, for instance, in direct mail or any other channel. And finally, before we go to questions, I thought I'd spend just a brief amount of time talking about Lyris. As Lee introduced us, we have been working with Direct for a number of years now. Globally, we've been around since 1994. We're one of the pioneers of our marketing. We've seen a lot of changes in the industry, and we're very excited about the industry at the moment. We work with around 5,000 clients around the world in the Americas, Europe. And we offer, best in breed marketing platforms. So we actually have an email platform. So with that, I'd like to pass over for any questions.
All right, thanks, Bob. I think your audio might be slightly cutting out just towards the end there. So, Bob, if I can get you to put yourself on mute just while I go through the questions here, because there's a bit of echoing as well, I've been told. So, just as I ask the questions here, Bob, thanks for that. All right, so I've got a few questions here, Bob, and I think you've gone through everything in really good details. One of the things that tied in nicely with our last newsletter was progressive profiling. What I found really interesting there is that it can all be automated from their website. What we put in our last newsletter is ways that they can, I guess, manually do a whole bunch of progressive profiling, in that it's really important just to capture the basic details on your landing page if you're doing a whole bunch of lead generation, and then incorporate some other, I guess, manual strategies. If you don't have a platform like Lyris to automate this, you can do things like ask additional information in return for a discount voucher. So, sign up here and we'll email you your discount voucher, but with that sign up form, ask additional questions that you didn't originally ask on your landing page. So it's really interesting to see that can be fully automated with a platform like Lyris. So we've got a few questions here, Bob, which I might ask. There's quite a generic one here, which I might start with, which I think you've covered off anyway. But if you can just reiterate, I guess, the main points of this question. I have a high amount of subscribers who don't open and click. What should I do with them? So Bob, I think you've pretty much covered that. But if you just want to, I guess, reiterate the main points to cover off that question for me. And if you can put yourself on mute.
So yeah, even though we did go touch on that, I think it's a great question, because it's a problem a lot of marketers have. That typically open and click rates are around the 30% mark, and you will have your database around half of which aren't engaging for a long period of time. So our recommendation is always that re-engagement stream. So the people that aren't engaging, so over an extended period of time, usually 3 months or 6 months, is to really drive them to what's called the re-engagement stream, i.e. send them a stream of communications while isolating them on your daily, weekly, monthly newsletters, and making sure that you communicate to them in a way where you can either have them start engaging with you, or you'll actually then be able to put them into a suppression list and only try to activate them once or twice a year.
Sorry, I'm just putting myself on mute, so there's a bit of delay there. I might ask this question because it ties in nicely with your answer there. What would you say the time for, I guess, non-engagement would be? Just to give you a bit of, I guess, internal insight, we generally, people that haven't responded to one of our emails in, say, 3 months, we would call a non-engaged user and would generally not send to them. Now, it's different for, I guess, most clients and how they manage their platforms, but what would you say, Bob, would be a decent amount of time to say, right, I won't email them my regular offers or newsletters because they haven't responded in X amount of time? What would you say, the recommended time for that would be?
Yeah, so we would agree with that on 3 months tends to be the right amount of time, i.e. if someone's not engaging within that sort of 90-day period, then that's a good time to move them out of your regular communications and into that re-engagement stream. However, that can vary, and that's where looking at your data can help. So, for instance, a daily deals website who are emailing their subscribers every day might have a shorter period, i.e. for them it might be 1 month that they would say is unengaged because they're emailing them every day. Whereas, a business that's only emailing their subscribers once a month or once every 2 months might want to extend 6 months. So really the best answer is to look at your data and get an overview of how much your subscribers are engaging, and then set it accordingly. But a good rule of thumb is 3 months.
Cool. Ties in line with what we're doing, so that's good to hear. I've got actually 2 questions here which I might just kind of take the liberty to join together, and hopefully it covers off your questions there. First question: I have a much higher amount of Facebook fans than email subscribers. Is there anything I can do with them? And Bob, if I can also get you to cover off, this client has a lot of offline subscribers, so what can they do with them? So I guess the answer, you can kind of combine those 2 questions if you can.
Question we actually get quite a bit. You can substitute Facebook for any number of channels, but we do receive, we do have a lot of clients who will have a small email database, but could have 100,000 or more Facebook subscribers. So to answer the first question, what we recommend is for every channel where you're seeing this, to build an opt-in form. So Facebook specifically, you can actually build email subscription tabs within Facebook, and then we recommend incentivizing subscriptions from there. So running comp is a really, really great way of doing that. So running competitions on Facebook to ask people to subscribe to your email for their chance to X. Now, as I said, you can substitute Facebook for any other channel. So if we look at an offline channel, for example, a company that may not have a strong e-commerce presence or may not have an e-presence and who has a large database for in-store customers, you could do the same thing if you wanted to convert them to online. Either you run competitions in-store, send out direct mail to encourage them to subscribe. Just incentivizing the ability for people to subscribe helps, and just making sure you do that across all the type of channels where you do have customer data.
Thanks for that, Bob. That's I might just ask a couple of questions myself, if that's all right. going back to, you know, all of the examples that you did for Harvey Norman, there was quite a number of programs that were, you know, quite in depth, including the segmented dynamic programs, which I found really funky in terms of inserting dynamic content based on the profile of your subscribers. To me, that's one of the best ways to keep your list engaged, is sending them relevant content that they're going to love and that is just relevant to them. Now, obviously, you know, setting up all these various programs, you've got your welcome program, your segmented dynamic programs, your progressing profile, the browser abandonment, which you can get a whole bunch of information from, your cart abandonment program. There's a whole bunch of programs it seems you can do within Lyris, in particular for e-commerce clients. What would you say for non-e-commerce clients? A lot of our clients sort of sit within the informational type business, so where they're you know, consulting or providing information or a particular service where they don't have a you know, an e-commerce site as such. What would you say out of those programs would be the most, I guess, beneficial for those types of clients? And do you have any examples? Sorry to put you on the spot here, Bob, but if you have any examples of sort of a non-e-commerce program, that would be fantastic to go through.
We work with quite a large range of, you know, obviously retail is quite a significant industry, and we do a lot of work there. But one of our largest clients here in Australia is their business is basically the provision of information. So they don't actually sell any products. What they do is provide information to relevant segments. And so the way we deal with that is exactly as you said, think dynamic segmented newsletter, i.e. when they send out their campaigns, i.e. when they're sending out the information that they need to basically send to their database, they send out the one newsletter, but each piece of content is relevant to each particular segment. So they may send out one large newsletter, but let's say segment A requires content A, segment B requires content B. The actual articles in the newsletter are only displayed based on the relevant segment. So there's a lot you can do in terms of provisioning content where you're not necessarily tying back to any sales data or any sort of information there. As long as you've got the segments in your database, which a lot of businesses do, and which certainly Direct and Lyris can do. But as long as you know what content, what customer or what type of data you have, you can then tie the content back to that segment. So we run a lot of programs like that where we tie in information to a particular segment block.
Cool. So for just as an example, we've got couple of clients within the property space. They could do dynamic content in terms of targeting, you know, first homeowners versus, you know, the seasoned property investor, or they could break it down into, you know, state targeting and things like that. Would it be correct in saying that, Bob?
Correct. So I think your example there is a real great one. So so if you have a client in real estate who wants to send out information, let's say once a week, then that they can send out a newsletter with a piece that's quite generic and quite relevant to all people in the database. But then if there's specific pieces of information, say for people who've ticked that they're first home buyers, say there's people that have ticked their investors, you can create a dynamic content block within that newsletter that only displays that relevant information. So if Lee is an investor, she would see the article relevant to investing. If I'm a first home buyer, I'd receive the exact same newsletter, but the content block will vary for me and show me information on first home buyer.
Yeah, cool. I did actually miss a question here, Bob. Typical time for setting up. I assume that's in regards to one of the programs. So in terms of setup, if you can run through, I guess, how much is involved for, end to end, what would be involved in a setup of a welcome program, what would be involved in potentially some progressive profiling, that sort of thing. It's quite a generic question, so I'm not sure whether you can answer it.
Yeah. Look, it is a quite an open question, because it depends on the complexity of the program that you're trying to set up. But a welcome program, for instance, can be really, really straightforward to set up. So the rule that you could set up for a welcome program could be as simple as, when subscriber joins database, send welcome. And in terms of setting that up, that's essentially all you would need to do in the platform to set up the business logic. But then also you'd have to prepare your email template. So go through the design and HTML coding process. But typically, in terms of setting up programs, the very simple ones can take as little as 1 to 2 weeks. The very complex ones can take 4 to 6 weeks. It just depends on the level of complexity. The way we recommend is to start off simple. So if you're starting off with no programs, then the easiest thing to do is start off with a welcome email, and then add on a second welcome email, and you could do that sequentially. So send the second welcome email 24 hours later, send welcome email 72 hours later. That's at a base level, and then once you've built that out, and once you've started to see results, then you can start testing and configuring it in ever more complex ways. So the great thing with email is you're limited really by your own imagination in terms of the level of complexity, and setting these things up can be as simple as a welcome program, or it can be as complicated as a cart abandon program, where you would need to link your e-commerce system with your email platform.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. So I hope that answers most of your questions online today. Thanks everybody for joining. Once again, if you do have any further questions on, list engagement in general, by all means call our guys. We are more than willing to help with a strategy which is tailored to your own business. We always are harping on about the importance of welcome programs, lead nurture programs. So this sort of takes it to the next level in terms of list engagement and ongoing list engagement. If you did also want to hear about Lyris in further detail, either you can ring myself directly, or we can arrange for you to speak to Bob as well. Thanks again for your time today, everyone, and we'll no doubt chat soon. Thanks again, Bob. Really appreciate your time today.